Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So it is the time of the month again where I do a monthly wrap up of what I've read this month and also say what's on my TBR for the next month. So September was an extremely busy month for me. I actually started my new job and I am absolutely loving it. However, it has meant that I've not had anywhere near as much time for reading as I would have hoped, as I've just been so tired each day when I've got back from work. Plus I've just started volunteering as well and hosting a book club, so it's just all gone on in September basically. But that being said, I still have managed to read a couple of books, so I thought I'd just do a little wrap up and share my thoughts on the books that I read in September. So the first book I read, I don't have a physical copy with me because my housemate is actually borrowing it at the minute, and that is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. Now, I was really intrigued by this book because I watched a Hayley fan video and she absolutely loved it and rated it 5 stars. And when I was reading it, I was thinking, okay, this is really gearing up to be a 5-star book. I really liked the writing style. It's the exact genre that I love. It's a thriller, and it just seemed so interesting. However, it took a bit of a strange turn, and I can't really say anything about it without spoiling it, but I think the direction it took isn't really my sort of thing. If you've read it, then I think you'll know what I'm on about, but it just took a turn and it wasn't really for me. Like, when I read that bit, I was a bit like, okay. I think the only way I can describe it without ruining it is that I just wish it was a bit more realistic. And I honestly think that's the only thing that stopped it from being 5 stars for me, because I did really enjoy the writing. So I'm very intrigued to read some of Riley Sager's other books. So overall, I ended up rating The House Across the Lake 4 stars. And that is literally just because of the one turning point in the book. Then the next book I read in September was actually my book club pick for the month, and that is The Book of Beginnings by Sally Page. Now, this book is about a woman called Jo who has recently got out of a relationship, and she has gone to basically run a stationery shop that her uncle used to run, but he got quite poorly. This stationery shop is quite far away from where she grew up, so she meets new people in the city, and yeah, it's basically about forming friendships. Now, when I first read the blurb of this book, I got really excited because it reminded me of The Story Life of A.J. Fikry by Gabrielle Zevon, which is one of my favourite books of all time that I rated 5 stars. However, it did not stay that way, unfortunately. This book just fell a bit flat for me. There just wasn't really a lot to it. I really liked the character of Malcolm. I think that he was very interesting. But there just wasn't enough plot to the book. There wasn't enough twists. And I know this isn't a thriller book, and obviously I read a lot of thrillers, so I'm always looking for twists, but I just felt like it was really flat and not a lot really happened in it. If you're looking for like a cute, wholesome, like feeling good book, then this is really good. But I don't know if it was just because of the season I'm reading it in. At this sort of year, like September, October time, I want to be reading thrillers and horrors and something that really makes me think. And this was just a bit too easy for this time of year, I feel like. This took me so long to read as well. I think it took me like almost 2 weeks, which is a long time for me to finish a book. Yeah, I just didn't want to pick it up because I wasn't that interested in it, unfortunately. I went to book club last night where we were discussing this book, and it was really interesting hearing everyone else's thoughts. A lot of people felt the same way as me, but there were actually a couple of people that rated this book 5 stars, and I was like, did we read the same book? I did rate it 3 stars, which now the more I think about it, I think that was quite generous because I really didn't enjoy it that much. But there were some points of the book that I did like. I particularly liked a quote that Malcolm says to Jo, where he says, "He may have been your lover, but he wasn't your friend." I do think that is really interesting. So there were a couple of interesting quotes and storylines in this book, but it just didn't take off enough for me. Maybe if I read it at a different time of year, I would have preferred it a bit, but yeah, wasn't a massive fan. And actually, our average at book club was 2.66 stars, so wasn't the most well-received book, but I think on Goodreads it's rated 4 point something, so people out there do love it, it's just not really for me. So I've actually only read 2 other books this month, and I'm not even sure you could really call them books because they're novellas. They are very, very short, but because the Book of Beginnings took me so long to read, I just didn't really have time to read anything else. So the first one will probably be no surprise, is The Gift by Frida McFadden. I finally got my hands on some more Frida McFadden books, and I'm so happy about it because I just love her writing so much. So the book is about a woman called Stella who is struggling quite a lot financially, and she basically really wants to get a good gift for her husband for Christmas. Now, I won't say what happens because it's very short, so I feel like anything would be a spoiler, but basically a twist happens in order for her to get this gift for her husband. And yeah. And this book is literally 50 pages long, so it's a one-sitting read, and I did actually quite enjoy it. The storyline was just very strange, and I feel like it might have benefited from being a bit longer just to kind of flesh things out a bit more. It just felt like there were a couple of plot holes. There is something in particular that bothers me a little bit about it, so I'm definitely going to get somebody else to read this and discuss it with them because I want to know if I've just missed something or if it's a definite plot hole. But yeah, it just didn't make full sense to me. But I did still enjoy it. It was exactly that kind of thriller, creepy vibe that I needed after reading the Book of Beginnings, and I rated it 3 stars. Now, the last book I read in September is another novella by Frida McFadden, and that is The Widow's Husband's Secret Lie. I have been looking forward to this for ages because it's only recently come out, and I was just so excited to read it. What intrigued me a lot about this book is that Frida McFadden is known for her psychological thrillers, but this is satirical, so it's still a psychological thriller, but it's funny at the same time, and it's just such a strange book. I have never read a book like this. Some things in this book were just absolutely ridiculous. Like, there's a particular argument that happens in it, and it's just the most ridiculous argument I've ever heard, but it's funny, but it also gets really dark. So it's just so interesting how, you know, humour and darkness can just work together to create something like this. But the narrator in this book basically has just lost her husband, but she keeps seeing him pop up everywhere. That's all that's really explained on the blurb, so I'm not going to go into too much more detail, but so many twists happen and just the most ridiculous things happen. If you want to read something super realistic, don't read this book because it's not realistic in the slightest. It is so out there, but the way that it's written, you can forgive it because it's meant to be funny. It really is taking the mick out of itself. And also, Frida McFadden mentions herself in the book, which was really strange and funny to me. This is another short book. It's just over 100 pages. So again, I read this in one sitting and I just absolutely loved it. I feel like this is going to be a love or a hate for most people because it is so ridiculous, but I absolutely loved it and rated it 5 stars. I actually put on Goodreads that I can't believe I'm rating this 5 stars, but I am because it's just amazing. I've not read a book like this and I just know that it's going to stick in my head for a long time. The average on Goodreads for this book at the minute is 3.4, so yeah, I don't think it's as well received to everyone else as it is to me, but I absolutely loved it, what can I say? So now we are on to my TBR for October, and I've decided to only give myself 4 books on my October TBR, mainly because of how busy I am. So I feel like 1 book a week is a pretty good target to set myself. But this is the time of year where I think reading is perfect, especially for the thriller genre that I love so much. So I really do want to try and give myself more time to be reading because it's something that I enjoy so much, and especially at my favourite time of year. So to start off with, the first book on my October TBR is God Killer by Hannah Kaner. Now this is the book club pick for October, so that's why it's a bit different to books that I would usually pick. I would never pick this book up if I was in a bookshop or even in the library. It's just not something that really stands out to me. And from my understanding, it is a fantasy and it's actually book one in a trilogy. It does sound quite interesting. Basically, the character Kissen saw her family murdered by a god, and now gods are forbidden, and Kissen makes a living by killing them. But then she meets a god that she cannot kill. So it does sound quite interesting, but fantasy isn't really my genre. It does seem like an easy to read fantasy at least, but yeah, I'm very intrigued. It's not something that I would pick up by the cover or by the blurb, but I am interested, so I'm glad that this book club is kind of forcing me to read more books out of my comfort zone. So yeah, this is very different for me, but still definitely intrigued. The second book on my October TBR has been on my TBR for ages and I keep pushing it back. It's The Fury by Alex Michaelides. Still don't know how to say his surname. And this is the book that's basically about being on an island in the middle of a storm and there's lots of things that go down. The Daily Mail has actually said that it's infinitely thrilling, delicately crafted, the plot keeps everyone guessing until the very end, do not miss it. Literally, whilst filming this video, I just want to read all these books right now. And I did really enjoy The Silent Patient, so I do just need to find the time to read this. The next book on my October TBR will be no surprise, and that is The Perfect Son by Frida McFadden. I have been wanting to read this book for ages, but I've not really seen it in any bookshops. But somebody from the book club had a copy of this and they have lent it to me for the month, so I am so grateful and so excited to read it. So this book is about a girl called Erica who has a perfect family, but then one evening 2 detectives show up at her front door. And it is revealed that Erica's teenage son was the last person to see this girl alive who has vanished. I just love Frida McFadden so much, if you haven't guessed already, so I'm so excited to be reading more of her books, especially the psychological thrillers. I've not actually read any of her women's fiction yet, and I would be intrigued to try that, but I just think she's such a brilliant thriller writer and I'm so excited to read this. I literally was recommending her to everyone at book club last night. And then the final book of my October TBR is something that I am so excited about, and I am definitely going to be reading it as soon as I turn the camera off, and that is Let's Split Up by Bill Wood. This book has been all over my social media, and just by the cover and the amazing sprayed edge, I was like, I have to get my hands on this. I know we shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but this book just looks incredible and I'm just so excited. It's brought that excitement in me to read that I haven't experienced for a while. So yeah, I'm just so excited to read this. And I actually think this might be Bill Wood's debut, so that's exciting as well. I do love reading a debut novel. It actually says that it's his debut traditionally published YA novel, so this is a YA horror, which I find very interesting. I don't mind YA books, I do quite like them, but sometimes they can be just a little bit simple, but I'm very intrigued by this because sometimes horror can be a little bit too much for me, so maybe YA horror is the way to go. And this book is basically about a couple called Brad and Shelley who are brutally murdered in this town, and a group of friends investigate. I don't know what it is about this book, I've just got really good vibes from it, so I'm very excited to read it, and I will literally be starting to read it when I turn this camera off. So as you can tell, my TBR for October is a bit more dark. I didn't really have much variance when I picked this TBR like I usually do, because I'm just in the mood to read thrillers, especially in October with it heading towards Halloween and things. So I just thought I would go to the genre that I absolutely love and I'm in the mood for reading, and then maybe I'll find more time in the day to read because I'm actually wanting to read these books and I'm so invested in them. But yeah, that was my monthly wrap up for what I read in September and also my October TBR. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts are and what your October TBR is. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.